In this session, I'll focus on interior rendering and share my how-to tips. I'll cover camera types, lighting, some material properties, optimal camera settings, and then exporting and saving your views. Each one of these subjects has in-depth videos where you can learn more through our video playlist. With that, let's begin with this Silverton sample ensuite plan and start with the camera types. In my upper menu, you'll see the camera view tools. In my toolbar, there are 4 different types of views: for framing, an overview, full overview, and a full camera. Let's open up each of these with the exception of the framing camera and take a look. In the perspective floor overview camera, I also call this the dollhouse view. It allows you to look right into the design. You can also move into each room using the wheel on your mouse, scroll in, scroll out. It omits a ceiling and it makes it an easy way to do your editing. I like this camera and it's one of my favorites. As I move back over into the floor plan and I use the perspective full overview camera, this is going to give you a full overview. In this case, I actually have a roof on here and it's looking from the outside in and then back into the floor plan view. The final camera, the full camera, is a point and click where you click and drag inside the room and it will generate the view for that specific room. You can wheel around and move your mouse. To navigate, you'll find the navigation tools for panning, dollying the camera, and orbiting the mouse. One of the tools is to be able to focus on an object. If I click on the vase in this area, it will focus directly on that. As I rotate around the view, it's specifically focused. It can make your navigation a little bit easier if you want to focus on a particular object. The 3 renderings that I've created, the full overview, the room view, and the overhead perspective view, may not look that great as far as sharing it with your client. I've set up my system to be optimized for editing in 3D, and then when I'm going to save a camera for the explicit purpose of sharing it with a client, I'm going to make sure I go through these settings. When you're going to do rendering, there are really 5 steps you need to focus on to create good rendering. The camera settings, lighting, which consists of sun and your light fixtures, the technique option settings, which might be standard render, might be physically based render, there are several others, putting in a backdrop, and looking at material properties. Each one of these is a subject in and of itself. I'd mentioned earlier about the video playlist. I would encourage you to watch these. I'm going to touch on a few of these, beginning with lighting, to share some of the tips that I use. Let me change my save plan view from the floor plan shell to the electrical save plan view. As I said, the lighting is both the man-made lighting and the natural lighting. As I zoom in, let's take a look. In the space, I've placed recessed lighting. I've also placed some of the fans and other lighting. You can see off to the bedroom, this is a tray rope light. If you're going to get good rendering, you need to place your lights. Make sure when you're in a room, you set up all the lights that are turned on. You can also build a light set. We have a specific video on that. That way, in the room, when you take a 3D view, it will have accurate lighting information. Each one of these lights, let me just double click on this recess 4 can, will have light data in it. Off to the preview, you can see where the light source is. It's slightly offset from the top. On the light data panel, you can come in, you can see the light information. It's a spot style light. You can learn about that in the help file, the intensity, and then the color. Sometimes for nice renderings, I'll adjust the hue of this color. You just click on it. You can then set in some of these colors in here that will add a little bit nice ambience into the light. A few other options to cast shadows. Sometimes I will leave the shadows off on my lights. It can be dramatic and add different effects. I've turned that off. There are a number of settings down here that you can learn about. Again, see the help file. It will give you all the information about this light. Make sure when you are in your camera or in your room that you placed all of your lights. Let's zoom out a little bit further. The next thing is natural lighting from the sun. I typically will do two lighting scenarios for the short and the long time of the year. And the first thing you're going to want to do is set your north pointer. I've set a north pointer, and the other thing you want to do is set your latitude and longitude. With your sun angles, I have two winter angles and I have two summer angles. Inside of these, you can double click and you can set the latitude and longitude. If you're doing your design work in a particular area of the country and it doesn't change, you can set this in your preferences. That way you don't have to adjust the latitude and longitude each time you make a new plan. If you don't change it, you're going to find out that your latitude and longitude equal North Idaho, which is where our headquarters is. So in this sun angle, you can see that here's the latitude, longitude, and then also the date and time of year, and if you wanted to set in the time zone, and then the ability to make or delete the shadow. You can see that I've actually generated the shadow July 4th at 10 a.m. So the shadow is being generated based on this north pointer, based on the latitude and longitude. So whenever I'm actually using the natural lighting, that's where the sun will be coming from at that direction. Also in this plan view, you can see that I have the three open active cameras. One in the room, one outside the room, and then the full overview camera. Each one of those tabs are represented over in one of these panels. So make sure you've set your electrical to have the view. If you don't do that, the view will be okay. It may not be great. It certainly won't be representative of what it could be if you place the natural and man-made lights. Let's take a look at the light in action. I'm going to open up a couple of saved cameras through my project browser. And one of the things that I like to do when I save my cameras is name them very specifically. I'm going to come down and I'm going to open up the bedroom 2 camera. Now I've purposely turned off some of the lighting and specifically the sun. Let's go through the Edit Active View and take a look at a few of these settings. I'm going to turn on shadows. There is an option for turning on raycasted shadows. It's going to give you a little bit smoother edge. Reflections, if you have a mirror, notice I have some reflections in the glass. This is appropriate for mirrors, so I don't need to turn that on. I usually don't turn something on if it's not needed because it's expensive in the rendering time. And then underneath the sunlight, notice that it's turned off. Again, I try to optimize my views, so I'm going to turn on the sunlight. You can see in the background now that the sunlight is turned on. And then when you click Adjust Sunlight, the sunlight is currently using the sun angle at 10 a.m. on July 4th. These sun angles can be edited directly through here, the lighting data. Depending on your rendering technique, I'm currently using physically based. My sun is set at about 5,000. I'm going to show you some of the settings I use here in a minute. And if I were using the standard rendering technique, I'm probably going to change that to a higher value, maybe in the range of mid-morning or even morning setting. So depending on the rendering technique, I'm going to adjust that sun accordingly. So with the sun set at 10 a.m., you can see in the background a little bit of the sun. And as I close the dialog, you can see the effects of the sun. The next thing I want to do is go back in and take a look at the lights itself. Let me close the library browser or the project browser so we can get a little more real estate. I have a lot of lights from the recessed cans. Notice that it's not too bright over towards the bathroom or even in the bathroom. I want to use a light set to make sure that all of these lights are on. You can either use a light set or you can crank up the number of lights being used in a scene. Back into the Edit Active View. Notice that the lighting is using a maximum number of 8 lights. The program randomly selects 8 lights, turns those on. You could change that to a higher value. If you just have a couple of rooms, you could type in 50 or so lights. I happen to have created a light set, which is a collection of lights by room. And notice that I have one that's called the bedroom and bath. I'll go ahead and turn that on. And then towards the bathroom, it's much lighter because I'm using more lights. They're turned on. you can see that light is now flooding into the scene. With the sunlight, currently we're set to July 4th at 10 a.m. I have multiple sun angles that can be selected. To toggle between the difference of those, on the camera panel, we take a look at the Adjust Sunlight, and they will all be available in here. If we switch that over to 5 p.m. in January, you can see the effects where the sun's not really coming in at all, and this can be helpful in visualizing how the scene's going to look. Now, one of the things I like to also do is have a little bit of fun. Turn on the generic sun, and I'm going to adjust that down to about 5,000 in the lumens because I'm using the physically based sun follows the camera. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the backdrop over to using a generated sky. This may be a little bit bright to begin with. Using the sun tool itself, I'm going to come over and the program will prompt me about using the setting to generic sun, so we'll make that change in the camera. And then let me just click and place the sun specifically where my cursor is, and I can do that by, on a PC, holding the control key down and clicking. On a Mac, it's the command key. Now, the sun is placed exactly in that position, and I can drag this around. You see the sun shadows coming around. I'm just going to pause right here briefly. You see a little bit of a fuzziness where my cursor is. That's the ray casted shadow. Now let's go ahead and continue to pull that down towards the horizon, and now we can get the horizon and kind of get a nice effect right out through the windows. This is using the generated sky. I have a moon tool. If I click and hold the command key down on the Mac, then I can place it. And then to make it a little easier to see, let's slide the camera around, or the sun, so that we can actually see the moon get generated. And then I'll just kind of pause at that horizon. And you can control the luminosity of those stars, the moon. You can adjust it. All of those settings can be dialed in. We have videos on those, so if that's of interest to you, you can watch and see how that occurs. Let's open up the project browser and take a look at the setting. I want to take a look at bath number 1, and I'll close the project browser. In this scene, you can see the reflection of the windows on the shower glass wall, and it's possibly distracting to the scene. In this scenario, I might want to turn off the sunlight. And if you take a look at how that looks without using the sunlight, let's go ahead and just turn that off. Let the resolution of the camera here improve with the denoising. Now you can see that with the absence of the sun, I'm not as drawn to the reflection of those windows. So in some cases you may or may not want to use the sun, and that may be an example of that scenario. Lighting makes a big difference on your scenes. And as I switch back over to this slide, materials make a big difference on your scenes. In this case, I have several materials in the bathroom scene. Materials have properties, and you can set different aspects of the materials. Let's take a look at using the Adjust Material Definition tool. It's the last tool in my upper menu system up here. Adjust Material Definition. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to click on the inlay in the floor. And let's take a look at the tile that I've used here. The Properties panel for this material is where you can set specifics about the material. Many of the materials that come with the program have default settings that work well. You can also import your own materials. You can also adjust the materials that we provide in the program. The material class, there are several different settings that range from the general material, matte, all the way down to the transparent. Several different settings. Depending on the material settings you have, notice there's a metallic setting in here. If I change something to predefined metal, then you get additional settings and you can make adjustments in here depending on what you're doing. There's settings for brushed, there's roughness settings, a roughness map. I'll show you a little key slide to that here in a minute. There are many settings that you can adjust for your material. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your scene, you can choose the material type and make the adjustments. So I'm going to cancel out of that, and let's take a look at this general material slide that I have up here. There are several settings for materials that you can enhance and improve the way they look. A flat 2D image of a material can be made to appear to have 3D surfaces. These are known as material maps. In this slide, the basic 2D image of the texture is in the upper left-hand corner. By adding normal, metal, roughness, and ambient occlusion maps, it can dramatically improve the appearance of the material. You will find a dedicated video you can watch to learn more about these material maps in our video playlists. Now, as I shift gears back to rendering, I want to show you a few of the tips that I will use with my rendering. I'm going to move back to the original cameras that were generated at the beginning of the session. Now let's come back over into the camera that is inside the room. So as you're looking at this camera, one of the things that I like to do, you have the full navigation tools over here. If you're doing something like maybe painting a wall that you can't see in this scene, let's say painting the back wall that we're looking from, and you want to rotate around and you don't want to change out of material painter, and let's go into that mode. And I want to paint the back wall you can't see, but I'm in the paint mode. You see my cursor's in the paint mode? You can remain in that paint mode, and I'm going to hold the Alt key down in the middle mouse and rotate around so that I can actually see that back wall, and now I could spray on that back wall to apply it. So holding down, I'm on a PC in this case, you can look at the shortcuts, but holding down the Alt key in the middle mouse button, and it allows me to orbit around. So this is one of the tricks I like to do inside of the room mode. Other thing that I like to do is I switch views into the next camera. Sometimes when you're working with a small space like the bathroom we have that is behind this room, we switch our rendering technique to the glass house. You can see into that bathroom, and now you can see into that space. If we switch back into the standard view, you can use the tool to hide exterior facing walls. You'll find that setting under Edit Active View on the camera panel, and at the very bottom is the option to hide the exterior facing walls, and then when you rotate around the model you can see right into the space. Maybe I'll turn the layer off on for these accessories to make it a little bit easier. I'll just go into the layer, turn off the accessories on the wall, and it will make it a little bit easier to see into the space if you have something that's pretty tight. It won't mask out the windows or the doors. This may be an option to hide exterior walls. You can do the same thing in this view. Sometimes I will turn that on. You can do the exact same thing if we turn on the hide exterior facing walls so you can see into that space, rotate around. I haven't touched too much on rendering techniques. If you switch back into the floor view, and let's zoom out here just a little bit, one of the things that I will also do is I like to use the different rendering techniques. This is the standard view. This is the vector view. It kind of takes away the materials, the wood textures, physically based we've been using. The clay view, if you turn that on, you can turn on different styles of views. You can colorize this. If I use the clay view, I'm probably going to turn on the line drawing on top. That way you can see some texture. Again, if you want to create a rendering view that doesn't have colors in it for your clients, then you can do that. As I kind of minimize this view, you can see that you can use layer sets and colorize the view. You can see how I've kind of taken this scene here and put some color in it. So I switch back over. The technical illustration view, again, kind of devoids it of color. Watercolor is also a nice view. I will typically always turn on the line drawing. Anytime you're in these technique options, you can click and modify this and make the adjustments. All of the effects for watercolor down on the watercolor panel. And then one of my more favorite options is to turn on line drawing just in the standard render. I typically will just set the line drawing amount and just use a thin thickness for the line drawing. And it allows you just to kind of see the edge lines when you're doing your rendering. So depending on what you're doing, the rendering techniques can be a lot of interest and fun to create those renderings that meet the objectives you're trying to achieve with your 3D rendering. Let's take a look at exporting your renders. I'm going to move back over into the completed rendering. When you're ready to export your rendering, there's a few different ways you can do it. Underneath the File menu and then down to Export, you can export this as a picture. Few options. I typically will export mine as a PNG file. When you go through the export process, you can then set the width, height, and resolution. If you're going to be putting this on a website, you might change the resolution to 72 and then the width and height. Currently this is using the active view. It will be the fastest. If you change it beyond the active view, you can do that. It will take a little bit longer. The program must stitch it together for you. The other way you can export your cameras is underneath the 360 option. This is going to give you a 360 view. When you export it, again, you're going to want to set the width and height. Remember, these images will be 4 times the width, so you're going to want to have a much larger width, and then the height is going to be 2 times, so you're going to want to take that into consideration. And if you want to save that up onto the Chief Architect Cloud, you can then copy that information, put it on your website, and then you can text it as well to your clients. Let me show you a 360 rendering that I have here. You can then get fully immersed into the design. I typically will set the focal point in the center, and then as you rotate around, then you have a better experience with these. These are nice to share with your clients and put on your website as well. The final way to export the model is using a 3D viewer model. You can share that with your client and they will have full 3D navigation of the model. You'll find that underneath the File menu, Export, and it's called the 3D Viewer Export. Once you go through the Export dialog, create a new model, you can save it onto the cloud. This is a free app that runs on a tablet. The client can use this app, they can navigate through it, and they can have fun experiencing the design you've created for them. One final export that I'll leave you with in this session is the ability to export a walkthrough or virtual tour. As I move back over into the floor plan view, I specifically like to create and have a layer set for walkthrough. In this example, you can see the walkthrough path that I've created here. When you click on this walkthrough path, you can get a preview of that by coming down and clicking on the preview panel. The nice thing about the preview is it allows you to move along the path and investigate exactly how that movement is going to occur. You can adjust it in this view as well if you want to rotate the camera and move it around, and then the record button will allow you to record it. You can choose your camera if you want to actually export this at a high resolution. Let me switch over. I'll show you where I've exported this particular walkthrough using the physically based rendering with the ray trace setting on. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you're going to get a high-end virtual walkthrough. Make sure you've done the preview and explored the path before you have the time invested in exporting this. But a great way to share a video with your clients and or social media platforms. Let's conclude the session by sharing some of my tips on settings for the physically based rendering with ray tracing. First, physically based ray tracing will only work on a PC due to the fact it's the only platform that supports the hardware accelerated graphics that the GPU ray tracing will require. If you're using a Mac and you want to use higher quality ray trace rendering, you will need to use what is known as our CPU ray tracing. Great results, but takes longer. I use the PBR GPU ray tracing exclusively for my interior renderings since they are generated in seconds. These are the settings I typically use and save in my template plan. They may not work for every scene, but they're a good starting point. Most of these settings were covered in the session, but let me do a quick review. In the camera settings, having shadows set to raycast, making sure your lights are on, then I set the ambient occlusion at 0. For the sun, I typically use 500. It depends on the type of backdrop you're using because the backdrop contributes color to the rendering. For the technique options, I set my exposure at 0.3 and then I set the export samples at 50. That way the rendering will stop after 50 passes, won't run forever, draining PC resources. I cap the live samples and then make sure that denoising is selected, which removes any of the speckle out of the glass or mirror and cleans up the scene substantially. Finally, the backdrop intensity around 1000. Again, it's a function of your backdrop and your sun. I hope this helps, and if you want to rewatch the session, pause the video and capture this last screen and make any adjustments. Thanks for watching, and I hope you can create some great renders yourself.
We're going to take some live questions. So we blazed through a lot of rendering settings in there, and hopefully now you're all experts and maybe you don't have any questions. However, we're going to open this up for any live questions you have. When you raise your hand in the GoToWebinar control panel there, and Carrie calls on you, be sure to unmute your microphone. We're going to focus on interior related questions for rendering. Just give us your name, maybe where you're calling from, and then we'll do our best to answer your question. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie for any questions we might have.
Thanks, Scott. We did have Sharon write in, and she was wondering at the end of the video when you cover Mac and PC, and she was just wondering if you could go through that one more time.
Okay, yeah. So if the question was related to the Mac and the PC, I think I have that. I don't know if it was this slide here. Let me just open that up. No, probably not that one. Let's just talk a little bit about hardware. I'll open up my hardware settings. So I kind of explained this. This is a slide that kind of goes through it. A lot of times I'll get the question, or we get the question here at Chief Architect, what's the best hardware for rendering? And really, if you go to our website, the very bottom down here of the slide, we have the system requirements. We have recommended requirements, and it will kind of help you figure out what you're doing. If you're going to be doing ray trace rendering, there's two ways to do it in our program. One is called real-time ray tracing. That is limited to the PC world because they support accelerated graphics. I've got a couple of examples of preferred cards up here from NVIDIA and AMD. Again, you can find that on the website. And for the Macs, you want to use either a Mac Pro or a MacBook Pro. That's the version of the laptop that will do the CPU ray tracing. So if you want to learn more about those system requirements, just go to the website. The link is down here. You'll find it in our menu system for system requirements. We have the minimum and the recommended system requirements, and hopefully that can point you in the right direction for the type of hardware you need.
Thanks, Scott. We have Kimberly here with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much, Scott, for the presentation. To follow up on the last person's question, I have a PC, but my NVIDIA card is not adequate to do the ray tracing.
Okay.
I have a difficult time doing these renderings so that they're real life looking. Can I still achieve that without the adequacy, without a NVIDIA card that doesn't meet your requirements for what you just showed, ray tracing?
So when it comes to PBR rendering without ray tracing, I think that the thing that I would say about that is that just with the way that graphics hardware trends are going today, what you're going to encounter is that we're not going to necessarily add a lot of new features to PBR as it exists without ray tracing. I'm still of the opinion you can get decent results with it, but it's going to be harder to do so, and you're going to be kind of stuck with where it is today. Now, I would say, a few years ago, this hardware was much harder to come by, but if rendering is something that you're interested in, then I would definitely recommend, a few years ago it was a more substantial investment, but today it's a much smaller investment to get a ray tracing capable GPU, and your results are going to be significantly better. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so results even for if I do like a non-ray tracing rendering, non-ray tracing rendering, my results will be significantly better as well. Is that correct?
No. You're going to see the most significant difference if you're doing physically based renderings. We do some ray tracing related things in other views, like in standard, but the impact of those is sort of minimal compared to what it is in PBR or physically based.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'll play around with it with the new tips I have from Scott. That'll be really helpful because I feel like I'm not really getting good renderings. And I'm not even trying to do ray tracing. I mean, I can't do ray tracing. So,
sure.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Yep.
Brian. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay, I'm back here, Carrie, if you want to pass the next question along.
Our next question comes from Michelle Smith. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Michelle.
Sure, I have a question. Can you show us how to set these settings in our default so that every time we open a new plan, the camera settings are already there?
Well, hi, Michelle. That's a great question, and that's very efficient to do it that way. In my template plan, I always have my camera settings kind of dialed in to the most common way that I do it. And the easiest way to do that, as I kind of switch over to the program here, is underneath of your default settings, a little wrench in the upper portion of my screen. It says default settings. When you go into your defaults here, in your 3D view defaults, a few things you can set up. I usually will go into most of these, but underneath the rendering techniques, and let's kind of focus on the physically based ray trace. So as I go into the default settings in here and I make the adjustments in here to, the exposure or the denoising or the backdrop intensity, all of those settings, I will then adjust these in my default settings. And I might go through that with the other cameras as well. And then I would repeat the process for the sunlight and any other thing that is important. Then when I'm all finished, and typically I'm going to do this in one of the most recent plans I worked on, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a save as template. So underneath templates, I'm going to do a save as template. And from the save as template, I might adjust a few of these or move some of them because I include schedules. And then once I've saved that as my template file, each new plan will have those settings going forward, in particular the rendering defaults that I like. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for the call, Michelle.
All right, Scott, we have Anne Marie here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, let's check in with Vicki Worcester. Hi, Vicki, how are you?
Hi, I have a question about rendering daytime scenes. When you were showing the bedroom and bath scene in the daytime, you still had the lights on inside. How would you do that? I mean, if it's noon, you don't have your interior lights on because you've got natural light coming through the windows. How do you set that up so that would work without having your electrical lights on?
Yeah, so good question. Hi, Vicki.
Hi.
Are you coming to the Chief Academy?
I can't this year. We spent a beaucoup amount of money on our special vacation this year, so I can't come.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
Yeah. So your question about, if it's daytime out, maybe it's, during the day and you have the electrical on. And this is kind of the example that I showed. The bedroom off to the right-hand side is where we're looking. And I actually was using the sun shadow, which is represented by this hashing off to the left side. So the sun shadow is really not coming directly in. And so when I generate the camera view, I don't have sun coming directly in the windows here. And if we kind of open up that camera plan or that camera, let's just kind of take a peek at it. So let's go into the bedroom here and let me open that up. Grab this one, double click on it. So right now I don't have the sun coming in directly in those windows. Does that make sense? I also don't have necessarily a backdrop. And
Right.
then if I understood your question, you can turn the lights off or you can turn them on depending on what type of scene you're trying to generate.
So if you had a daylight scene like that and you
Yep.
turned the lights off,
Yeah. Okay,
it would
sure.
be too dark, right?
It probably would be, yes.
Yeah. So how would you fix that up?
Well, let me ask, what would you like to see? You'd like to see all the lights off and then having the sun come through the window?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the first thing I'd probably do is I would remove the light set. So we'll just set it to be automatic, and I'm going to zero out all the lights.
Okay.
Right? So in theory, I won't have many lights on. So step one, right? So I don't have the benefit of light coming on, and then I'm going to go into the sun and I'm going to make some adjustment. And probably what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this move sun tool so that I'm not using the north pointer. So let's turn off that, and I'm going to click, use my control key. I'm going to click right in the area over here, and let's make sure we have the sun turned on. And then let's also adjust our rendering technique to the physically based, so that starts to get a lot brighter. So I don't have a backdrop in here, but you can now see how the sun's coming in. We slide the sun around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're after?
It still looks like the light with the fan and the little can lights
yeah.
are on.
Well, that's a good observation. And if we look at why, I'm going to use the adjust material definition tool. It's a little rainbow tool off to the side.
Mm-hmm.
We typically set the material properties of the glass on the light to have a high emissive material. So if you look at this material, and I'm on the properties panel, let's pull it down so we can see that, right? So if you look at this material, it's called lighting white high. And you see that down here where it's using some of these settings down here. This is what's causing that to appear that it's on, but it's not sending any light into the scene. It just looks like it is.
Yeah.
So it's like a head fake, right? So if we were to, let's just change this down to 0, right? And let's also, let's zero that out too. And then let's close this and just see what happens.
Oh my.
Right?
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So now I have
I
have a different lighting for the recessed cans, so it's still a little brighter. But that's why it appears to be so bright, is because of those property settings behind there.
Okay.
If I
to me that looks more realistic because it's daytime and you don't have your lights turned on.
Right.
Yeah. I have another question. In fact, I may send you a rendering that should have been with plenty of light in a kitchen in daytime, but it just doesn't look right.
Okay.
I might send that to you.
Okay, sure.
Anyway, a second question. I love the idea that you can turn off the exterior walls, but say you're in a bathroom and the camera angle you need to use is from like the doorway of the bathroom. You can't back up far enough without having the interior wall. So you can't get rid of that. How do you get rid of the interior wall?
Okay, so if I understand your question, let me just switch back over to a simpler view here. if I understand your question, you've got a small room, and this, I saw this question written in quite a bit. You've got a small room, you want to create a rendering of it, and it's a little bit challenging because there's walls in the way or maybe a cabinet's in the way, and you want to create the best possible renders. So there's a few techniques that I will do, and let's just kind of generate a new view right out of the gate here. Let's say I want to come in from this corner, so I'm just going to click and drag my full camera, and I want to generate this view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I back out, and I'm going to use the I on the keyboard and O on the keyboard for in and out. So I go in and I go out, and at some point I go through the wall, right?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a couple of settings that I will do besides making the walls invisible or hiding exterior facing walls.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into the Edit Active View, and that's a tool up here in the upper portion of my menu,
Mm-hmm.
and we come down into the camera, so there's a few things. The very bottom of this dialog is field of view and clip surfaces within 1 inch. And I think our default, I'm not positive, but I think our default is clip surfaces within 12 inches or 1 foot.
Mm-hmm.
So that means when you zoom into something, it might start to cut into the surface and you can't see it if you zoom real close to a cabinet, it cuts into it. So I move that back out. So I have to be right next to that cabinet before it looks inside of it. So I will adjust clip surfaces to that. The field of view, so let's kind of pull this down a little bit. So let's just change this field of view to something like 90 degrees and just see what happens. And then I'm going to use my in tool, right?
Ah, okay.
So that's
Okay.
field of view. So that's expanding the view out. It's, you know, just like it says, field of view. It's expanding it out so you can see a broader view. Now, it distorts it a little bit,
Yeah.
perhaps. You could change that to 180 degrees and it probably would start to get beyond what you'd like.
Yeah.
So field of view will give you another setting. And there's a few other things. If you move over to positioning of the camera, this allows you, sometimes you said, well, I back out just past the wall and then I go into the doorway or something like that. You can be pretty precise on where this camera is positioned, height above floor, the tilt angle, and then the incremental move distance. I might change that to 1 inch. So that means when I move in with my mouse or my keyboard, it will move it only 1 inch.
Uh-huh.
Or you could set it to be 1/4 inch if you're really, really close. The other thing I will do is, here's my camera right here in this plan view. I will click on it, hold my control key down for more flexible movement, and I'll try to jam it. You can see my field of view, right? I'll
Yeah.
try to jam it right in the corner, and I might get close, right? So in the plan view, I can also adjust this camera, and I may need to go back into 3D view and slightly, because my field of view is pretty large, and I might have to adjust it slightly, but it allows me to get right up next to those walls.
Okay. That that helps a lot.
Yeah, so field of view I use quite a bit. Again, that's on the camera setting down towards the bottom. And if we move it back to 60 degrees, you can kind of see what's going to happen with the field of view. Again, using the in and out on your keyboard, and then the combination of moving over in your floor plan view and moving that camera to a precise position allows you to kind of get in where you're after.
Okay. That helps a great deal. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Hey, thanks for checking in with us today.
Sure. I wish I could be there on Labor Day weekend or just before, but
We'll see you next year.
this time.
Carrie?
Yep, we have Anne Marie here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions. Make sure you unmute your mic. Okay, let's try Tina Smith. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Tina.
Hello, this is my first time having the experience of looking at your presentation, and I am in the Chicagoland area. I have never had this opportunity to work with such a product. I came in about 17 minutes into the presentation. My bonus question is, do you have to have a full set of working drawings for your room? I noticed how you stepped outside of the property and you pulled walls down from the exterior to show the transparency. So can you just kind of share with me the onset of how you actually lay things out to get started?
So, well, welcome, Tina, and thanks for checking in. The question to the group here is, do you have to create an entire plan? No. If I go back in here and let me just open up just the bath project here. Let me just grab that real quick. A lot of stuff open. There we go. So one of the things that I've done in this particular example is this is just the bath project. And when you are creating a design, you can do a whole house or you can just create a bath. And then, you know, kind of the three cameras that I showed were the dollhouse view, which gives you the top-down view without the ceiling. And then there's also the full overview. And if you have a roof turned on, you can build the roof. In this case, I don't have the roof turned on, but that shows you where the ceiling is. And then there's different camera techniques to, you know, show wireframe and those kinds of things. And so if you want to learn more, tomorrow morning we are having a session on the boot camp. And if you want to kind of learn how that works, if I kind of open that up here, a lot of stuff open, so I'm just kind of turning my head over to our events. If I can find it. There we go. So tomorrow morning, we are having a boot camp on kitchens and baths, and then there will be one on residential in September. So if you want to attend that tomorrow, that's a free session. You can sign up online and learn more.
Great, great. And did you discuss what the cost is for using the system and the duration of the contracts?
Well, basically with our software, you can use this either on a monthly basis, or you can do it annually. And so if you go to the website underneath products, you can learn a little bit more, or, you know, we can give us a call, or we can give a shout out to you and help you out a little bit there.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep,
Those are your questions.
Yep. Okay, great.
All right, Scott, let's see if Lisa Taylor is available. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Thanks so much for your presentation. I have had some problems with specifically bathroom PBR renders. I do not have a problem doing any other rooms in the house, but for whatever reason, my bathrooms look very washed out. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just a washed out appearance. And I've actually done a private session with Kayla. We started, you know, working, trying to change settings in my camera. We tried doing regular ray tracing and nothing seems to work. We couldn't figure out if it was glass, so we would hide the glass on the showers. We would turn off, you know, mirrors on lights. We've tried everything. Do you have any suggestions, words of wisdom?
Well, Kayla is very knowledgeable, and maybe if you haven't done so already, you can send that plan in. We can take a look at it. These are the best suggestions I have on dialing in your setting. it's only basically a guideline because it depends on what type of backdrop you're going to use and what type of rendering technique you're going to use. But these are the settings that I typically will set in when I'm using the physically based render with ray trace, and they're a really good starting point. And so if you wanted to, just do a screen capture of that or a picture from your phone, give that a shot. If it still looks like, oh, it's washed out, well, you could paint it red. But send us the example, and we'll take a peek at it for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling in.
Scott, it looks like we have several people writing in a similar question, and they were wondering if you could demonstrate how to create the water in the bathtub.
Okay. So yeah, if I zoom in here a little bit, I put water in the bathtub, and you can see it down in the watercolor view as well. And I did a little bit in the sink. It's just a little thing that I typically do, and the way I do it is once I place the fixture, let's say the bathtub, I then will just draw a solid using the solid tool, and then I will paint it with water. And so if I were just to open up that particular plan, gosh, a lot of stuff open. Let's switch over into the camera view we had open. So here it is in just the standard render view, right? And if I click on that solid, let's go ahead and open it up. So all this is a solid. You can see that it's not very thick, right? And then I painted it with water, which you can kind of verify with the adjust material definition tool. So that solid tool is in your menu system. And if I just kind of draw a solid out to the right over here, then let's make sure that I draw that solid. Let me draw in the plan view over here. There we go. Sometimes it is a function of where that comes in. So let's just make sure that's set from the floor to bottom at 44 inches. Okay. Then as we go back over into that 3D view, you see the solid, right, that I just drew. And so then it's a matter of opening up your material painter. And if I just do a search for water and find the different water options, then I'll just spray it, and then I have a chunk of water. I'll usually put that on a different layer, so when I'm doing my construction drawings, when we switch back over into something that's a little bit more professional looking for kitchen and bath, then I will put that layer on a layer called CAD Kitchen and Bath. So you don't see it in the bathtub or something like that because it can get distracting. So hopefully that helps with how that water scene works.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. We have Dan Johnson with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Dan.
Hey, thanks. We've found it useful at times to bring in a client's, backyard, especially if they're on a lake. Do you have any tips for positioning that as a backdrop?
Well, thanks, Dan, for the question. So typically when you want to use a realistic image for your backdrops, I try to get those photos from the positioning where you want to actually shoot it from the rendering. So let's say you're going to do a bathroom. There's a big picture window on one of the walls. I will try and go in that position in the backyard and shoot that photo so that it can be as near representative of where that position is going to be. Likewise, you take one out the other side of the house or the front of the house, and you can save those backdrops uniquely with them. I try to avoid having too much shrubbery. I saw somebody wrote something in earlier, and I had a couple of backdrop examples. Here's one that I had with a sunset. And one of the things that I try to do in this example is you notice that I don't have anything too close to the screen at the bottom. I don't have a tree or something. I will then also crop off. There's a lot of water here. So if you look at how I ended up cropping that photo, as I go back here, I ended up cropping that photo so that most of the water, that's no wrong one, sorry about that. Most of the water is being chopped off, and this is what it ended up looking like. So I chopped off most of the water so that I got just the horizon in there. But I don't have a giant tree. Somebody wrote in the questions earlier. I don't have a giant tree right in the foreground with a big tree trunk, so that when I'm looking out the window, I see that tree trunk. Of course, it may be relevant, of course, but I try to avoid doing those things, Dan.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah.
I think our issue is probably we're doing big panoramas and trying to position those
Right.
appropriately.
Yeah. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time here, and I'm going to stick around for a few more questions, but if you need to take off, and I just wanted to pull up a couple of slides here, I want to allow you to take off. We're going to send an email out with the recording of the session, including the questions we continue on with. Let me just bring up a couple of things here. One is, if you wanted to use this particular sample plan we're looking at, that is on our samples gallery. If you go to our website, it's the Silverton Ensuite. You can download that plan. If you are not using Chief Architect Premier, maybe you're using Home Designer, or maybe you don't have Chief Architect, you can download a free trial version and use this. And then when we send out the replay of this webinar, you can actually maybe follow along and repeat any of these processes. The webinar series that we've been working on, this is the third. If you want to watch any of these webinar series, we started out with floor plan dimensions, elevations, and annotations. These are available as a replay on the website, so you'll be able to access those. And then I wanted to make you aware that we do have a boot camp. It's tomorrow. It's free. The boot camp tomorrow will focus on kitchens and baths. The Chief Academy, which is one of our marquee training events, will be over just before the Labor Day weekend, and we have a few seats left there. If you wanted to come to Coeur d'Alene, we'd be happy to host you. And then we're repeating the boot camp specifically for full residential, and that will be in the first week of September there. So those are free events, the boot camps, and if you'd like to learn kind of how the program works and get started, those are a great way to do that. So with that said, if you need to take off, you still have a question, you can send us an email and we'll do our best to take a look at it, sales@chiefarchitect.com, and we'll see if we can get you an answer to your question. And then if you still have a question, I'm going to stick around here and allow a few more questions to come in. If you can't stick around and you need to take off, hey, thanks for attending. Have a great day. And I hope to see some of your renderings that you've been able to create. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Carrie and see if we have any remaining questions out there.
We do, Scott. We have Leslie here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. This is Leslie Cohen in Raleigh.
Hi.
Hi there. Well, with much searching, I answered one of my own questions, and other people might wonder too, because and then I'll have another question, because you guys, moving through everything, and I have spent, since you first mentioned edit active view, I have been looking everywhere, and I'm searching in help for where that was, and I finally found where it is, because you know that when you did that, showed how to edit active view, I took the plan I had, went back to my floor plan, open the camera, not like open the view, but open the camera to fix it all, because I actually never have used that little square with the pencil on it up there. Okay. Amazingly. Okay. So it's never ending. I've been using Chief for years, but you can't stop learning this. So anybody who doesn't know how to do that, that's where it is. I thought I had killed it off on a toolbar somewhere. My question is, so I upgraded, we've got 3 computers. I replaced all 3 of them in 2020, late 2021 and 2022. So everything we have is a 3080. you know, so everything's new, but it's 3080, and that was all there was at the time we bought all that. And ever since I got to X15, my renderings look horrid. Since you've said some things, I've just been messing around with a couple of other things. And I already just improved one of them in that edit whatchamahoozy tool. Yeah, well, I actually took the ambient occlusion and dropped it in half. And I don't know what that means, ambient occlusion, but my rendering looks about 1,000,000 times better. So I see that there's more. I mean, I've been playing with all sorts of things, but without really understanding them. So I guess that it's hopeful that with 3080s on all the machines, I should be able to get good rendering still. Okay.
Yeah, there's also, Leslie, if I open up this slide here, if you want to see specifically our training videos on rendering, I should have a specific one for those rendering resources. So there is a specific camera and lighting video that when you go to the video playlist, it's kind of broken out into categories. Underneath rendering is cameras and lighting. And then there's a ray trace video playlist, and this is kind of a graphic of one of the videos out there, but it goes through in detail all of the different settings. So if you want to invest a little bit of time, this is a great resource that you can watch. Some people could binge watch it if you wanted to over the weekend, since Netflix is getting expensive. Then you can learn about all of the different settings. There's, you know, to be fair, there's a lot of settings, you know, sun, lights, you know, you mentioned ambient occlusion. So there's a lot of settings. So this is a good resource that you can learn how to dial in all of your rendering for your projects.
Thank you for that. Because, you know, sometimes it can even be overwhelming trying to search through the videos and figure out what's the right video to watch. So that's great. I just wrote that down so I could focus on that and try to understand those better. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in today. And I'm glad you found the Edit Active View. It's a handy tool to get access pretty much to everything you need.
Ready for your next question, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
All right, we have Sandeep here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, just a background. I've been using Chief Architect now for, I think, 25 years when you guys first introduced this thing.
Okay.
And never consider using anything else. I have, as far as rendering is concerned, you know, I always use the standard rendering mode and even just then render those things as best as I can. And so today, or also while in the past, I've looked at the physically based renderings, and today is the first time I'm kind of seeing a really nice rendering coming up with that, and it looks like it's continuously rendering as it's on the screen. Mm-hmm. Every time I change it a little bit, it starts all over again.
Right.
So, which is fine. My question is, you know, where the wall meets the ceiling, I've always noticed this. It looks like there's like a rope light running all the way across the interaction. And
sure.
And it only appears in the physically based rendering.
Okay. Yep. Good question.
And I'm wondering what's going on.
So there's a couple things. Let me just open up one of these cameras here. So there's a couple things that could be going on. So the first thing is you mentioned that you move the view a little bit and it continuously renders. So one of the settings that we've made a change to, if you go into the physically based rendering settings, you can set your maximum export samples. Mine's set to be 25.
Okay.
And it could be in a previous version that may have been set to as high as 1,000. That means it's doing a pass each time to create and improve the render. Well, 1,000 is a lot, and it
Right.
will basically, cause your computer to heat your house. So
Yes.
I dial mine down to 25. If I need a little higher, I might update it to 50. And then the other thing is to cap the samples so that it will, stop and then denoise when it does stop.
Yeah, so I'm seeing it is set to 1,000.
Yeah. So adjusting that down will make a big difference for you. So make sure, especially if you said you've been using the program for 25 years, even if you've been using it for a few years and you've upgraded and that is set to 1,000 in your sample plan or your template, then you can
It's coming
adjust
from
that.
an older version.
Yeah, it came forward. Okay, so your next question is, sometimes I see a light that comes around the ceiling, right?
Yes.
And we are aware of that can happen. One way you can stop that, I don't think I have any light bleed. I think I call it light bleed coming through the corners where
Right.
the ceiling and the walls hit, is you can build a roof. Even if you don't care about what the roof looks like, that will then kind of stop that process from happening. So just build a roof on it, and then that, in theory, should solve most of your light bleed issues.
Got it. Okay. All right. And this is something I've never noticed before. I see this thing's been rendering for like 5-10 minutes now. There's certain points on my screen. There's this weird thing where it looks like it's burning a hole in my screen.
Oh, well, maybe adjusting your cap max samples down from 1,000 to 25 will help.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. If it continues, you can reach out to our tech support group on that.
All right. Okay. Well, good.
Yep. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank
you still had okay. Thanks, Sandeep. Carrie, do we have more questions out there?
We do. We have a question from John. Hi, John. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. I am here in Woodinville, and I've been using the program for quite a while. I love the new PBR feature. Unfortunately, it's costing me a lot of money to constantly upgrade that graphics card so I can get quick denoised views. That cap sample, fantastic. It's a great way to do it. And then the denoise is just wonderful. So I've found a nice balance point. But this cover sheet that you're showing us now, I have, because you guys have upgraded and added stuff all the time, I finally, old dog, new trick, decided to play around with the schedules, because you can pretty much make a schedule for anything, and it's extremely powerful. In the lower right-hand corner, you've got a schedule for fixtures. And I assume those are the plumbing fixtures.
Right.
That's powerful if your client wants you to get specific, and you've inserted it into a construction document, which could be useful. I've also used notes with links to the website where you can get these, which is a neat feature also, or a combination. But what I'm discovering is I get too many of these little note bubbles in the floor plan. You've got elevation views of the main wall, and you've got the simplified notes. But on the fixtures and your fixture schedule, where are your notes on your plan? You just left those off, or decided not to use?
Sounds like we lost you, John.
Oh, you can't hear me? Hello?
I missed a little bit of that. I turned my camera off.
Oh.
Hopefully that will free up some bandwidth. I missed part of it. You get a lot of notes all over, note bubbles up. Yes,
I do. And I have to play around with the note bubbles and move them, because the they appear like, I use a diamond on my floor plan, and it assigns a number, and they appear on top of the fixture. So if you highlight the fixture, you can actually move the note bubble around, except when it comes to sinks. Sinks inserted into cabinet, you can't move the note bubble around. And I was wondering if that's just me or I'm missing something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me switch back over into my plan view here. And let's turn on our labels. And then if I can't do that real quick, I'm going to probably need to punt because we come back to rendering questions and see if that, let's turn on our labels here. So I don't have a note bubble on there, but I do have the sync base thing and I could move that around. If you've got your appliance labels on, and you can't move it, sometimes you can zoom right in and find a little move handle, move it. And if you still can't figure out how to do that, just either send us your plan in or give us a shout and we'll help you out.
Oh, okay. Well, I talked to Maxim and it looks like maybe it's just a, not a bug, but it's just a oddity, a fixture inserted into a cabinet.
Okay.
But I love the power of the schedules because you can get an awful lot of information on
right.
from.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Yep. Thanks for calling in, John.
Scott, do we have time for a few more questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
More.
Let's check in with Georgianne. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Georgianne.
Hi. So I'm not an architect, but I use Chief Architect, and I have been for, I don't know, maybe 3-ish years. The company that I work for, we design and build luxury home theaters. And so all of my renderings are subterranean. No natural light. It's all like we design the lighting in the room. You know, we build a home theater from, you know, the floor up, including the right. So I mean, I won't say self-taught because I think these tutorials are amazing. But is there a specific place I could go to without, you know, spending too much time in this forum on subterranean, you know, unfinished basements, or, you know, we work with architects, we're supplied with, you know, either specific plans of, you know, the home theater space has already been designated, or we are recommending, you know, where to put this home theater in your unfinished space that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious. I want to be better versed on you know, all the electrical stuff and the, you know, how to adjust the lighting and all that. And someone's mentioned Kayla. I don't know if that person is a resource for like a very specific one-on-one for a specific need.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, a couple things. One, we do one-on-one training, and I believe Kayla's even on this session today. She's very good at rendering, and doing one-on-one training with somebody like her is a great jumpstart to point you to achieving the goals for your project. So you can sign up with that, and she's a great resource. The other thing, in fact, I think she produced these videos. If you go to our video playlist and you look on rendering, cameras, and lighting specifically, and through our website over here, if you come over underneath our user center down to training videos, these training videos are broken out into categories. And if we kind of come down into renders, camera, and lighting, then you can see, let's expand that list to all kinds of different videos that have been produced specifically in relationship to setting up your camera and your lighting. So this can be it's a free resource, and it's also self-taught. So this is a good resource that you can use at any point with your learning about how to improve your rendering and or lighting skills. So a couple options for you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
And Georgia and I chatted out a link to the one-on-one training. Our next caller is Jill. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for doing these webinars. I have found them to be so remarkably helpful. I really appreciate the time that Chief Architect is putting into these trainings.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
And my original question was actually answered by a previous person, but I did have a question. I have a client that has approved a very beautiful lighting fixture, and I've checked all of the manufacturer catalogs, and this particular manufacturer does not have the files available to import into Chief Architect. However, I was able to find it in SketchUp, and I'm just wondering if there's any option, because this fixture's kind of an investment piece. It's very expensive, so the client is asking to see it in the rendering. Is there an option to import in SketchUp files, or do I just need to work with something like Photoshop to display this in the current rendering?
So you can import SketchUp files, right? Have you done that before, Joe?
Sorry, I have not. No, I have not done that.
So, you know, the easiest one, they support a format, I think it's called Collada, in addition. So the Collada file is probably the preferred format. You can bring that in. When you're going to import a light fixture, it's probably not going to have any light associated with it. It'll just be the surfaces of the light fixture, which is helpful, right? You can go in and build a man-made fictitious light source, and you can put it approximately where the light should be coming out of that object. So you can force light to come out of it by using those light sources in our program. And the way those work, I'll just kind of point you to it. Gosh, a lot of stuff open here. So if I want to create a fictitious light source, sometimes I'll do that underneath a countertop or something. But underneath your light is this thing called Add Lights. And let's go in here. Whoops. Where is that tool here? So underneath the Add Lights tool, which is this light bulb with a little plus sign. You see that?
Yeah.
So that's a light source, and once you have that light source put in your plan, you can then kind of set the elevation information for it, the light data associated with it. So much like, let's say, a recessed can or another light, you can associate that with it, and then you can also show it in 3D, so you can, if you put this position in a camera view, where is the height of this location? Let's go ahead and absolute. Okay. So then when we take a 3D view of that, make sure we turn that on, and we take let's just shoot a camera and see if we can make sure we can see this. So you see that light source? I explicitly turned it on.
I see the light crosshairs.
Yeah, it will emit light. So it might be a little bit of work, but if you've got this expensive light fixture, right, then you could go in and place a few of those and position, and I usually turn this only on for editing. Then you can position those around that fancy light that you've got, and then see it emit light for your scene.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think in this case, that would be very helpful, and I actually have the lumen output for each of the lamps in it. Now, I jumped onto 3D Warehouse, and I see there are a variety of downloads available. Was it USDZ that you would recommend? There are 6 different.
They should support a Collada format.
Oh, I see. Okay. Collada, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And that can be one way to manage that.
And then I just import that in through the library, or do I import it in as like an object into the file?
So once you've downloaded the file, I'm trying to think if I have a Collada file handy. me see if I have one here. Yeah, you should just be able to drag and drop that into the program, and it should show up in your library, and then you can play it. Yeah.
And drag and drop it into the program, do you mean like under my file structure, or
Yeah,
just
so
open?
let me see if I can do a quick search here for Collada and see if I just have one. I know I have a bunch, I just don't know that I can find it quickly. And if you want, you can shoot us a picture of that light fixture. We'll take a look at it. I'm just be curious to see how complicated it is. And yeah, I don't have one. You should just be able to drag and drop that into your program, and it'll put it in your library, and you should be able to place it.
Okay, okay. I guess I'm still just a little uncertain about dragging and dropping it. I'm not sure where, if I'm taking it from my download folder, I'm placing it into another folder. I've never used any objects renderings.
I unfortunately don't have one, but let's just pick something here. If you had the Collada file here and you pull it over into your scene like this, it should show up in your library.
Oh, that's so easy. Okay.
Yeah, I just don't happen to have a Collada file that I can quickly get during the session today, but you should just be able to drag and drop it, something like that. It will show up then in your library, and then you can place it. I usually try and do that in a 2D view if that's possible.
Oh, thank you so much. This is opened up a whole new world.
All right, thanks, Joe.
And Jill, I chatted out a tutorial for importing a symbol. Okay, our next caller is Jennifer Howard. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for today. I'm actually having some luck with physically based renderings while I'm on with you. And we are having one big challenge where I know to turn on all the light sets, to get as many lights as possible. Right now I've got a view open into across the kitchen, and then there's a butler's pantry behind it. And when I go to adjust lights, I have it on automatic maximum lights 300. There's only 29 total, or 32 total.
Okay.
And I can see that all the kitchen lights are there and they're saying in use. All the butler's pantry lights are saying on, but they're not in use and they're not showing up.
Okay.
So it's dark.
Yeah, that makes sense if they're not in use. So let me just open up a larger plan here so that I can kind of just point you to something. So this plan here has hundreds of lights. If I switch over to the electrical view, these rope lights in the tray ceiling are, significant. If I just kind of point and click in this view towards the kitchen, and we look at the lights, I think my default might be 8 or even 20 lights that are going to show up, because I don't have too many lights on in my default setting because they're expensive, and I like to do my editing in quick 3D views. So I don't have a lot of lights on. So when you come in to edit your lights, and this scene looks dark because I don't have many lights on, but if I come in and use the edit active view, and I look at the number of lights that are being used, it's only 20. And you said yours is set at 300, right?
Mine's set at 300.
And are you using any rope lights?
No.
Okay. So what you might try to do, because you said that your lights are not in use, and one way you can figure that out is you can click on the light, and I clicked on this recessed light in the center, and currently it says it's turned off. So I can explicitly click on that and turn it on.
Well, it says that they're on, and when I go in the room, the light says it's on. It's just, I can't get the check mark to appear for the in use, and I can't figure out how to override it to tell it.
Okay, so when I go in, let me see if I can point you to the right thing. When you are looking at adjust lights, and currently all of my lights are probably set to be check marked to be on in this left-hand column over here, right?
Yep.
But the in use column is probably not turned on because I only have 20 lights, right? And so let me make this bigger so you can see it. So I don't have a lot of in-use lights, right? I only have 20, and we had to scroll down to find all 20 of these possibly. So they're intermittent. So if it's not set to be on, what you could do is explicitly build a light set. And then you can see I have maybe a kitchen, living room, wine room light set. And in that case, you can see that I can explicitly set those to be on and off. And then it will force the scene to use a specific light set that's going to take a minute to generate. So you could try the light set. If that's still not working and showing up for in use for you, just give us a shout and we can see if we can look at your plan and see what's going on with your saved camera.
Okay, yeah, I'm clicking it right now, so I'm having to go, so doing it from a light set, I'm having to select everything.
It's easy to build those, Jennifer, from like a, you can do it, you know, a lot of times what I'll do is when I go into the lighting tool and we're looking at the adjust lights, let me go back in here. So the way I typically build a light set is I might make a copy of one, and I think we ship with this one called default light set. Yeah. So you can make a copy of that. Once you make a copy of it, we'll just call it copy. Once you make a copy of that light set, you can then sort your rooms, and you can, you know, grab and multi-select and turn things on and off. So this is a quick way to, you know, adjust your lights. So you can go in by room, you can go by floor, just by simply sorting that. And that's a quick way to kind of figure out what lights you want on and off. And then if you need to do a light by light in a 3D view, you can tap on an individual light if it's on or off.
I think something might be screwy with the file because as I click, as I'm setting up a PBR set, as I'm clicking the on button, sometimes the check in use is going, and then if I click one, something else goes off. So it sounds more like I've got a glitch than, because this has never happened before. Normally, if I stick 300 lights, everything goes on in the house, but it's really not behaving now.
Yeah, it sounds odd. You might try a light set, those automatic lights.
Yeah, no, I just did a light set, and as I'm doing it, I'm clicking some on and some are automatically turning off. And now I have a light set selecting them all, and not a single one says in use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so, okay.
If that persists, you can reach out to our support group.
Okay. All right. I'll see what happens. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jennifer.
Scott, do we have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, let's do a couple more.
All right. We have Kenneth. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Kenneth. Okay, our last question then will be from Lewis. Hi, Lewis. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Well, it looks like that's it for today. Scott, did you have any announcements you wanted to make?
Yeah, thanks everybody for attending today's session. Just a few things that I'll close with. If you want to look at some additional rendering resources, you can find on our video system a number of camera and lighting, as well as ray trace. There's also, I saw a number of people chatted in about materials and tiles. We have a substance player. If you search the Chief Talk website, you can learn about how to build tiles with nice textures and material maps. We do one-on-one training, and those are very efficient if you have a specific project and you want help with it, maybe dialing in the rendering settings. then we can do that via one-on-one training. Support articles are also a nice resource. The additional item that we have coming up are a boot camp that will be tomorrow. If you are new or would like to learn a little bit more about the basics of the program, we're doing one for kitchens and baths tomorrow, and that's in the morning, of course, in our time zone. And then we're doing the Chief Academy just before Labor Day, and we're also going to be doing another boot camp the first week in September. So hopefully we'll see you at one of those events. Thanks everybody for attending. Have a great day, and we hope to see you soon.